My name is Jane Whitmore. I'm 36 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was the chief operating officer of Whitmore & Sons Custom Design, the company my father built with his bare hands, and I helped turn into a nationally recognized name in high-end interiors. I gave up everything for that company. Offers from firms in Milan, New York, Tokyo. Opportunities that would have made me rich, famous, or both. But I stayed. I stayed for my father. I stayed for the legacy. I stayed because I believed that loyalty meant something. Then, without warning, I was erased. No face-to-face conversation, no family meeting, not even an email, just a voicemail, 15 seconds long. Jane, the board has met. Your position has been dissolved. Effective immediately. Do not come back to the office. Your personal belongings will be delivered. It came while I was sipping a cappuccino, still glowing from a successful pitch meeting with one of the largest hotel chains in the country. That call ended my career, my role, my identity, in 15 seconds. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't call back. I typed one word into the reply box, understood. And in that moment, the only thing louder than my silence was the sound of everything I had ever built, collapsing. Let me take you back. Because the fall never makes sense until you understand what came before the drop. I was born into the business. Some kids grow up with bedtime stories and lullabies. I grew up with fabric samples, lumber invoices, and the hum of showroom halogen lights. My father, Robert Whitmore, was a craftsman in the old-school sense. His mantra: measure twice, cut once, and never let emotions interfere with execution. He built things with wood, steel, and stone. I built systems, networks, relationships. Mom Linda was quiet, graceful, the kind of woman who folded napkins into swans without ever drawing attention to her hands. She never interfered in business matters, at least not publicly. Then there was Kyle, my younger brother by 3 years. Charming, smiled like he had a secret he'd never tell. Dad called him the people's person. I called him the talker who never delivered. We were supposed to be a trio, Dad the founder, me the architect of growth, Kyle the future face. It was a good story, until I realized I was the only one still working, while everyone else was writing their own version of the ending. By the time I was 29, I had turned Whitmore & Sons into a multi-state operation. We were featured in Architectural Digest. We landed the Governor's Mansion project. Our signature blend of historic preservation and sleek modernism became a model in design schools. But I never put my name on any of it, because I believed the family name was enough. That someday Dad would hand me the reins, not just the reports. That Kyle would find his rhythm. That all the sacrifices I made would be seen. Looking back, I don't know if I was loyal or just naive. There were signs, small, almost imperceptible at first. The Johnson proposal had my figures, my breakdowns, but Kyle presented it to the client. My name wasn't in the packet. The new client welcome kits used his signature instead of mine. One day a longtime contractor whispered, "Are you stepping down?" Thought Kyle was taking over. I laughed. But the laugh didn't last long. Gregory Stone arrived 6 months before the voicemail. "Just a consultant," Dad said. "Old friend. Been through some things. Knows how to streamline operations." He had perfect posture, hair too silver to be real, and a voice that always felt rehearsed. He praised my work but asked too many questions. He complimented the team but met with Kyle twice as often. And when I brought up concerns to Dad, "Jane, you worry too much. Let the process play out. Gregory's only here to help." It was Mom who finally pulled me aside at a garden club fundraiser. She reached across the drink table, touched my hand, and said, "You're not seeing what they see." I asked, "What do they see?" She hesitated, looked down at the cut glass in her fingers. Someone who's already made her mark. Someone who might want to move on. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the length of my loft, staring at the awards on the shelf, the blueprints rolled up in the corner, the photos of me at site visits, wearing hard hats, steel toe boots, clipboard in hand. I wasn't done. I wasn't even close. But they had already decided. And then came the voicemail. It hit like a surgical strike. No explanations. No emotion. Just clean detachment. The kind of cold efficiency that Dad would have respected if it hadn't been aimed at his own daughter. I replayed it only once. The words didn't change. But somehow on the second listen, I heard something more: chilling finality. The next morning, my company email was locked. My office keycard blinked red. My work credit card declined when I tried to buy coffee. I tried calling my father, straight to voicemail. I called Kyle. No answer. I called Mom. Her phone rang once, then went dead. The silence that followed wasn't just about words. It was about absence. Absence of loyalty, absence of family, absence of decency. I didn't know then that they were already briefing clients, telling them I had moved on voluntarily, that I had burned out and needed time away. They didn't just fire me, they rewrote the story. I remember standing outside the office 3 days later. I watched as a courier wheeled 3 boxes to the front door. My boxes. Inside them, framed photos. My ergonomic chair pillow, a potted fern I'd kept alive through 5 winters, and a severance agreement signed in ink by Robert Whitmore. No handwritten note, just a sticky tab that said, "Please sign and return for processing." I placed it on my kitchen counter. I didn't touch it for 2 weeks. But that silence, that one-word reply, it had already become my first act of resistance. The first time I noticed something was off, it came in the smallest form. My name wasn't on the Johnson proposal. It had always been their top right corner under the logo beside Kyle's. We'd built that client relationship together. I managed the materials sourcing, handled the site inspection myself. Kyle only attended the final meeting late and forgot the blueprints in his car. I thought maybe it was a printing error. I asked Megan from marketing about it. She blinked once, then smiled too quickly. "Oh, yeah, they wanted a streamlined version. It's still your work, obviously. But the next week it happened again. This time the Taylor Group's hospitality rebrand. My layout, my vendor negotiation, my team. But the client presentation handled solely by Kyle. And when I walked into the conference room, no one had saved me a seat. Kyle laughed and patted the back of the chair beside him. "We got this, Jane. Don't worry, just enjoy a morning off for once." I did sit. I did smile. But something inside me whispered, "Pay attention." Later that afternoon, I pulled up the email chain about Taylor Group. Kyle had forwarded it to Gregory Stone. That name didn't mean much to me then. Just a line in the CC, a courtesy loop perhaps. Dad had mentioned Gregory once, offhandedly. Old buddy from my early days. Financial brain. He's going to take a look at our structure. I wasn't sure why we needed it looked at. We had record numbers, glowing press, and a waiting list of high-end clients begging for design slots into next quarter. Still, I said nothing, because that's what you do in a family business. You assume the best, you swallow the rest. Gregory Stone appeared the following Monday. He wore gray that looked expensive but not flashy, spoke in a soft honeyed drawl that made you forget he hadn't actually answered your question. His handshake was brief and dry. His smile never reached his eyes. I introduced myself and extended a hand. He didn't look at my badge. "Oh, Jane, of course. Robert's pride and joy. We've all heard of your vision for the governor's library. Beautiful project." I nodded politely. It was my project, my design, my team. But his tone sounded like someone reading from a brochure, like he wasn't speaking to me, so much as announcing I'd already peaked. By the end of that week, Gregory had held private meetings with Kyle 3 times. They'd huddle in Dad's office with the door closed, then emerge with polite nods and not much else. I asked Dad about it once. Just kicking around some ideas, he said, pouring coffee from the thermos he always kept beside his desk. "Kyle's got good instincts. Gregory's sharpening them." Good instincts. This was the same Kyle who once greenlit a $14,000 chandelier for a Mediterranean-style kitchen. It arrived. It clashed. The client cried. I covered the cost myself. I reminded Dad of that incident gently. He shrugged. That's how he learns. But when I made a mistake like underestimating tile lead times by 4 days, I got a printed memo about vendor accountability copied to the senior team. Fairness had started to feel asymmetrical. Mom and I met for lunch on Friday, a tiny bistro she loved in Tribeca, the kind with white plates, pressed napkins, and no menu, just a chalkboard of rotating dishes. She arrived early as always, wore that same brooch she'd had since I was a teenager. I remember giving it to her on Mother's Day, a delicate swirl of silver and turquoise. I sat down and smiled, but she looked tired. Her lipstick was a little uneven. She reached for the water, then paused mid-sip. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded. then looked around before leaning in slightly. "You're not seeing what they see." It took me a moment to realize she meant me. I laughed lightly. "What do they see?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. A woman who's outgrown the house her father built. Someone who might want to build something of her own now. I frowned. "Is that what you think?" She shook her head. "That's what they want to believe." Then she said nothing more, stirred her soup, changed the subject to flowers, but I left with something stuck in my chest, something cold and heavy and shaped like suspicion. I returned to the office on Monday with a plan. I told myself I'd reassert my presence, reestablish structure, make sure no one forgot who ran operations around here. At 9:03 a.m., I walked into the conference room with printed handouts for our expansion logistics meeting. Kyle was already there, leaning back in Dad's chair, like it had always been his. Gregory sat beside him, tie loosened, sipping from a branded Whitmore mug as if he'd always belonged. They looked up at me mid-conversation. I nodded politely and handed each of them the documents. Kyle didn't even flip through his. Gregory smiled. "Appreciate the thoroughness, Jane, although we've already reviewed some alternative frameworks." "Alternative frameworks," I repeated, trying to keep my tone even. "Just playing with models," he said with that practiced tone, streamlining for scale. I looked at Kyle, then at the whiteboard already half filled with figures I hadn't seen before. Timelines that didn't match the ones I approved. Supplier codes that weren't in our current database. "You met without me," I said, quieter than I expected. "Just a brainstorm," Kyle shrugged. "Didn't want to burden you, thought you could take the week to breathe a little." Breathe. I had slept 4 hours total over the weekend, working on those logistics. I'd skipped my friend Ava's baby shower. I'd forgotten my dry cleaning again. Gregory leaned forward, lacing his fingers. "You know, Jane, sometimes stepping back allows others to step up. It's a sign of leadership, not absence." He said it like it was wisdom, but it felt like poison wrapped in parchment. I stayed late that night, walked through each project folder, rechecked every PO, reconfirmed dates, supplier invoices, updated spreadsheets. I built this operating system. I knew its rhythm, its tolerances, its cracks. At 11:23 p.m., I found a flagged purchase order, materials, rerouted from our Pennsylvania vendor to a new supplier out of state. Higher cost, lower certification. The digital signature Kyle's. He didn't have authority to approve POs over $10,000. But somehow, he had. I opened our contract database. There it was. A document dated 3 weeks prior. Amendment to delegated authority, signed by Robert and Gregory Stone. It gave Kyle temporary expanded powers under strategic realignment protocol. I hadn't seen this. No one had shown me this. No one had told me this. I stared at the screen for 10 full minutes. I don't know if I blinked. Then I packed my bag and walked out into the cold night, not sure what I was walking toward, but very sure of what I was walking away from. The next day, I overheard 2 junior designers talking in the break room. I thought Jane was still VP. She is technically. But Greg and Kyle are prepping some kind of leadership shift. "Did you see the org chart draft?" I didn't confront them. I just stood behind the door, holding my coffee like a prop. Leadership shift, org chart draft, preparing the shift. The phrase lingered in my mind all morning like a fog I couldn't clear. When I entered my office, someone had moved my chair. That was small, I know, trivial. But it wasn't where I left it. It faced slightly left, not center. My back had always been to the window, angled just enough to keep glare off my monitor. Now the sun hit my screen full force. A tiny change, but it screamed, "You don't belong here anymore." That afternoon, Gregory sent out a company-wide email introducing something called Vision 2025. A new directive for the brand, a 5-year plan. I wasn't copied in the drafting threads. I had no input in the rollout timeline, but the document had my face on page 3. A stock photo from our photo shoot last year, beside a quote I'd never said. Sometimes the best designs come when we let go of control. Let go of control. I closed my laptop, not because I was done working, because I realized I wasn't working with them anymore. I was working around them. The following morning, I stepped into the design floor as usual, but something was off again. The team had rearranged their workstations. My nameplate on the central project table had been quietly removed. A new intern I hadn't met was sitting in my old spot. She looked up at me with a nervous smile and said, "Oh, I was told this was available." I didn't say a word. I just nodded and walked to my office. Inside, the framed photo of me with the governor's renovation team was gone from the credenza. In its place, a neutral sculpture, a faceless bust in polished marble. Elegant, cold. Who placed it there, I didn't ask, because I already knew the answer. Later that day, a client called Ms. Livingston from the Hanover Conservatory. I'd managed her entire project for the past year. "Jane." "I'm confused," she said over the line. "I received a call from a Mr. Stone about some design changes. He said you'd transitioned to a more external role." My hand clenched around the phone. "I'm still leading that project," I said evenly. She paused. "He was quite convincing." "I'm sure he was." I hung up. Then I walked into my father's office. He was reviewing tile samples, flanked by Kyle and Gregory like some warped executive triad. "I need a word," I said. Robert didn't look up. Gregory answered first. "Of course, Jane. Let's step outside." "No," I said, sharper than I'd intended. "I'm speaking to my father." That got his attention. Slowly, Dad looked at me. His eyes were tired, detached. "I just got off the phone with Hanover," I began. "They were told I've stepped away." "You're overextended," Gregory interjected. "We thought some breathing room would allow." "I didn't ask you," I snapped. Gregory's smile froze. I turned back to my father. "You asked me to grow this company." "I did." "You asked me to handle operations." "I did." "You asked me to fix Kyle's mistakes." "I did. So if you're planning to replace me, I suggest you say it to my face." Silence. Then Dad said, "We're evaluating structure. Nothing is final." Nothing is final. But it already felt finished. That night, I stayed in the office alone. I opened every archived email, every budget spreadsheet, every supply chain report I'd touched in the last 2 years. Line by line, I could see the trail subtle rerouting authorization shifts, internal memos I'd been blind copied on. They hadn't just nudged me out. They'd prepared it. Kyle had been shadowing meetings I once led. Gregory had rewritten protocol. Dad had signed off. And I'd missed it all because I believed I was untouchable. Because I believed that being loyal was the same as being indispensable. I was wrong. As I packed my bag to leave, a junior employee passed my office door. Her name was Tanya, bright, talented, always kind. She stopped awkwardly. "Ms. Whitmore, can I ask you something?" I turned. "Of course." She hesitated. "Are you leaving?" I blinked. "Why would you ask that?" She lowered her voice. "They've been saying that there's going to be a new operations lead, someone external." "Who told you that?" She looked down. "HR, in confidence." "I'm sorry, I just didn't want you to be blindsided." I smiled. "Or tried to." "Thank you, Tanya. That means more than you know." She left. And I sat in the dark, hands on the desk I once believed I'd die behind after a lifetime of leadership. Instead, I was now waiting for the blade to fall, and I would not flinch when it did. It was supposed to be a celebration. I had just walked out of the Birch Hotel on 5th Avenue, sunlight, bouncing off the glass canopy above the entrance, the words "confirmed partnership" still echoing in my ears. We'd done it. After months of proposals, mood boards, cost projections, and site visits, the Birch Group had finally signed on for their nationwide rebrand. 8 properties, 3 tiers of service, full interior concept redesigns, a portfolio-defining win. My portfolio. The senior manager shook my hand before I left, smiling as he said, "You're the reason we chose Whitmore. You don't just design spaces, you understand people." Those words still warmed me as I turned the corner and walked into the little cafe across from Central Park. The smell of ground espresso, a distant hum of piano jazz. My shoulders relaxed for the first time in weeks. I ordered my usual double-shot oat milk latte and waited by the window, watching the trees ripple in the wind. That's when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Voicemail, Robert Whitmore. No missed call, just a voicemail. Odd. I tapped the message, held the phone to my ear, and I stopped breathing. "Jane, the board has made a decision. Effective immediately, your position is dissolved. Access has been revoked. Your replacement has been appointed. Your personal items will be delivered to your apartment. This is final. Do not contact the office." Click. No hello, no goodbye, no signature. Just done. My father's voice stripped of warmth. Not angry, not apologetic. just efficient, transactional. He had fired me like a contractor, like I was a mistake to be corrected quietly. And worse, he hadn't even wanted to hear my voice when he did it. I don't remember much of what happened in the next minute. I remember the barista calling my name once, then again, louder the second time. I didn't move. Around me, people sipped drinks, typed on laptops, laughed into phones. The world hadn't stopped, but mine had. 15 seconds had rewritten the story of my entire adult life. I didn't cry, I didn't scream or storm out or slam my phone. I opened my message app, typed one word, understood. Then I closed my phone, took a long, slow breath, and walked out, leaving my untouched latte on the counter. Outside, the air smelled like burnt sugar and spring wind. I walked without knowing where I was going, past joggers and street musicians, past office towers and food trucks, the city's noise folding in on itself. I had nowhere to go, not because I didn't have an apartment or a bank account or a plan, but because the place I had built my sanctuary, my battlefield, my legacy was gone, taken from me in the coldest, most cowardly way possible, with a voicemail. I walked for almost 2 hours that day, past places I'd designed, past spaces I had helped breathe life into. Whitmore designed lobbies, storefronts, cafes. They stood there, beautiful, finished, unaware their creator had just been erased by the very name etched in brass on their cornerstones. I ended up on a bench near the West End promenade, staring at the river. It was late afternoon. A couple walked by with a stroller. A man jogged past in a sharp blue tracksuit. The world kept going. No one knew. No one cared. I opened the voice memo on my phone. I played it again. Jane, the board has made a decision. Effective immediately, your position is dissolved. The same chill spread through my chest. The same numb silence followed the words. I could hear the faintest hesitation before he said my name, as if he almost didn't want to say it, as if by avoiding my name he could avoid acknowledging me altogether. I went home. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. Not Ava, not Marcus, not even Rachel, my therapist. I just showered, put my phone on silent, curled into the far corner of my sofa with a throw blanket and an empty mind. The ceiling above me had small cracks. I never noticed them before. They weren't dangerous, just cosmetic. Faint hairlines, like fractures under the paint. I stared at them for hours. The next day, I tried to log into the internal server. Access denied. My keycard failed at the building. My work credit card was deactivated. My email inbox shut down. Even the parking validation app booted me out. They hadn't just removed me. They had scrubbed me, sanitized me like a stain. I received no phone call, no explanation, just silence. That evening, 3 boxes arrived at my door. No name on the sender label, just Whitmore Logistics. Inside my framed credentials, my nameplate, a desk clock I had received after 5 years, a brittle potted plant that hadn't been watered, and the plaque from the governor's mansion project engraved with my name. Taped to the top of one box was a manila envelope, a severance agreement, 3 months' pay, no benefits, no exit interview, a gag clause, no note, no signature, just a yellow sticky at the bottom of the page. The handwriting was my father's, precise, cold. Please sign and return to process payout. R, not love, dad, not sorry, not even my name, just an initial, like I was a stranger he once did business with. I didn't cry. I sat there staring at that envelope, holding it between my hands. I didn't tear it. I didn't sign it. I didn't burn it. I just let it sit there, a silent weight in my lap. And then I laughed. It was short, quiet, sharp, the kind of laugh that starts in your stomach and ends with your ribs aching. Because what else was there to do? They hadn't just let me go. They had premeditated it, scripted it, buried it beneath weeks of polite avoidance, and all along I had been showing up early, staying late, bringing lunch to the interns, taking calls on weekends, defending Kyle's impulsive mistakes, filling in gaps, leading by example. While they planned my exit, I didn't sleep that night, not really. I dozed in a chair by the window, the city blinking outside like a machine too large to pause. At 4:12 a.m., I opened my journal. I hadn't touched it in months. The first sentence I wrote was, "This is not the end. It's just the point of no return." Because I knew that nothing would be the same again. Not my name, not my relationships, not even my memory of who I had been inside that company. I turned the page, then another, and started to draw. Not revenge plans, not resignation letters. I drew chairs, tables, ceiling details, molding profiles. I drew spaces. Because even if they'd stolen my title, they hadn't touched my gift. The next morning, I put on my most neutral business casual outfit. I tied my hair back, no makeup, and I went back, not to storm the office. I went to the building across the street, the coffee shop across from Whitmore HQ. I sat in the window booth, ordered tea, opened my laptop, and watched. I saw Kyle arrive late, of course. I saw Gregory shake hands with someone I didn't recognize. I saw Linda, my mother, walk in carrying a folder. She hadn't called me either. I wasn't surprised. I left before they saw me, before I risked breaking that carefully preserved silence. Because silence isn't surrender. It's the last dignity you can choose when everything else has been taken. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to beg. And I would not under any circumstances give them the satisfaction of seeing me shattered. They had underestimated me in one profound way, they thought. Because I didn't fight back publicly, I wasn't planning anything privately. But I was. Every inch of me, every scar, every insult, every moment of betrayal was reorganizing itself into something new, something sharper, something deliberate. I printed the voicemail transcript that night, framed it, hung it above my kitchen sink. It was the last thing they ever said to me, and it would be the first stone in the foundation of everything I was about to build. The first thing I did the morning after the voicemail was dial my mother. Not to scream, not to ask why, just to hear her voice, to understand if she had known, if she had approved, if her silence meant complicity or fear. The phone rang twice, then went to voicemail. I tried again, straight to voicemail. I sat at the edge of my bed, clutching the phone with both hands, like it could soften the ache in my chest. I stared at my screen for 5 more seconds, then searched for Kyle's name. I hesitated, then tapped call. It rang, once, twice, then a click. The voicemail greeting was short, impersonal, robotic. I hung up before the beep. I got dressed slowly that morning. Not for work, there was no work to go to, but out of instinct or maybe habit. Clothes helped build a sense of normalcy, and I needed something, anything to hold on to. I tried my company card at the corner cafe. Declined. I tried it at the subway terminal just to see. Red light. Access denied. It wasn't just about cutting me off from the company. It was about making sure I couldn't even pretend to still belong. I went back home, sat at the kitchen island where I used to review blueprints late into the night, where Kyle once spilled soy sauce across a mood board the week before a client presentation. We laughed then, cleaned it together. It felt like a different life. I opened my inbox, my personal one, hoping, praying someone from the team would reach out. Nothing, no emails, no texts, no confusion, no apology, no, "Are you okay?" Just the algorithm-churned junk of old newsletters and shipping confirmations. I scrolled, refreshed. Nothing. I was being ghosted by everyone I trusted most. The doorbell rang around 1 p.m. When I opened the door, I saw 3 cardboard boxes, stacked neatly. No delivery person in sight. Taped to the top box, Whitmore and Sons. Operations Division. I didn't bring them inside right away. I stood in the doorway and stared. Something in me refused to accept that my entire career now fit into 36 cubic feet of cardboard. Eventually, I carried them in. One at a time. The first box was labeled Desk Items. Inside, a broken mug that read "Co" and "Still climbing my planner, still open to last week." A framed photo of me and Dad at the West End project ribbon cutting, taken the day he called me irreplaceable. The second box held a jumbled mess of fabric samples and project folders. Some bent, some coffee-stained, like they were scooped from my drawers without care. At the bottom was a printout of my bio from the company website. Someone had scribbled across it in Sharpie to be archived. I stared at the words, to be archived, like I was a phase. The third box was heavier. I opened it slowly. Inside was my degree from Columbia framed, the Crystal Award from the Design Innovation Gala, a leather notebook embossed with my initials, one Dad gave me when I was promoted to COO, and an envelope, I knew before opening it what it would be. The severance form. Again. Except this time it had a sticky note. My father's handwriting. Please sign and return for processing. R. No warmth, no regret, not even my name. Just an initial. A letter from someone who no longer knew how to be my father. I placed the envelope on the floor. I didn't touch it again that day. Instead, I sat in the middle of my apartment, surrounded by the detritus of a life professionally lived and personally discarded. I picked up the framed photo of the ribbon cutting. The sunlight in it was golden. I remembered that day vividly. Don't forget, Dad had said, placing the hard hat gently on my head, this company stands because you held the beams in place when no one else could. Then he hugged me, in front of everyone. And now, a voicemail. A stack of boxes. A single letter on a sticky note. The tears didn't come easily. They came in strange waves, brief, silent, unexpected. Like passing shadows. I didn't sob. I didn't wail. I just felt hollowed out. Like someone had unplugged me from the current that once ran through everything. Flash. A memory hit me without warning. 3 years earlier, Kyle had been tasked with a high-profile kitchen renovation for a magazine feature, his first solo lead. He had chosen Italian marble for the counters, but failed to notice the batch number discrepancy. The slabs arrived in 2 different finishes, one matte, one polished. The install team called me in a panic. Kyle had disappeared. I showed up that night, still in heels rolled up my sleeves, and found a solution, blending the edge lines, adjusting the lighting angles, ordering undershelf reflectors to mask the inconsistency. It worked. We saved the install. I never told Dad. Never threw Kyle under the bus. That memory used to feel like proof of teamwork, family. Now it felt like proof of my own blindness. I made myself a cup of tea, the kind I used to drink on long design nights, jasmine green, slightly bitter, always grounding. But it didn't taste the same. Nothing did. I opened the 3rd box again. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping something inside would explain what had happened, or undo it. At the bottom, buried under some printed floor plans and a cracked photo frame, was a small navy blue notebook. My notes, my sketches, the first concepts for Whitmore's transition into sustainable interiors, labeled in my handwriting, Vision Beyond 2025. I flipped it open. On the inside cover was a sticky note. One I had written to myself. Don't let them mistake your silence for weakness. It's how you stay in control. I had written that a year ago, after a heated meeting with Kyle, where he accused me of micromanaging his projects. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't defended myself. I let the numbers speak instead. It had worked then, but now I was starting to wonder if they had always mistaken my silence for something they could exploit. That night I walked to the park near my old elementary school, sat on a bench under the same sycamore tree where Dad used to take me on Sundays when I was little. We'd sit there eating sandwiches from the corner deli, while he taught me how to sketch floor plans in the margins of the newspaper. I used to think that bench was a symbol of trust between us, a private corner of the world where ideas passed down like heirlooms. Now it felt like a crime scene. I sat there for hours. The city dimmed around me. Streetlights flickered on. Still no call from Mom. No text. No word from Kyle. As if I had never existed. As if 30 years of service, loyalty, and love could be edited out of the family's history with one voicemail and a few cardboard boxes. A week passed, then 2. No one reached out. Even mutual friends began to go quiet. I saw people from the office view my Instagram story and say nothing. I'd see their names, their views, but no likes, no replies. Ghosts in the machine. Eventually, I received an email from HR, not a person. Just hrwhitmoredesign.com. Subject: final reminder, severance terms. Please return signed document by the 15th to avoid voiding payout terms. I deleted it, then blocked the sender. If they wanted to erase me, I would not make it easy for them. Flash. Another memory. Kyle was 22. I was 25. He had botched a lighting order for a modernist villa in Montauk. Ordered recessed lights that weren't fire-rated. The inspector failed the build. He cried. I remember that clearly. In the back of the site, van hands shaking, face red. Dad hadn't shown up. It was me who handled the city. Me who got the replacement units rush-shipped. Me who pulled a favor from a union electrician I went to grad school with. That night, Kyle called me his guardian angel. He hugged me, told me he couldn't imagine doing this job without me. Now he was doing it without me. Eagerly. One more week passed. I received another delivery. Smaller this time, a manila envelope. Inside was a printout of a press release. Whitmore and Sons appoints new COO to lead national luxury expansion. It featured Kyle's photo and a quote from Gregory Stone. We are excited to enter a new era. With fresh leadership and bold vision, the company is returning to its core identity while stepping confidently into the future. No mention of me, no mention of my 7 years as COO, no transition statement, no thanks, no goodbye. I flipped the page. On the back in a different font, probably an earlier draft someone forgot to delete, was a quote I recognized. From me. True design isn't just aesthetics, it's about integrity. They had copied my words, pasted them, but erased my name. I stared at the sentence for a long time, then folded the paper, put it in the bottom drawer of my desk, and locked it. Not because I wanted to keep it safe, but because I never wanted to look at it again. That night I took the severance letter off the floor, stared at it. Not signing was a small rebellion, a refusal, a line in the sand. But lines don't pay rent. Lines don't buy groceries. And I knew what they were counting on, that eventually practicality would wear down my pride. And maybe it had, because I opened a pen, uncapped it, then paused. My hand hovered over the signature line. I couldn't do it, not yet. Instead, I wrote something else on the bottom of the page. In large block letters, I built what you inherited. Then I folded the paper neatly, slipped it back in the envelope, and put it under the leg of my wobbly coffee table so at least one thing in my life would finally stand steady. It started with a message. No name, no subject. Just 5 words that landed like a punch to the chest. Connor Stone is using your office. That was it. Sent from an unlisted number. Likely someone from my old team. No greeting, no follow-up. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe they were warning me. Maybe both. I stared at the message for a long time. The words didn't change, but everything else inside me did. Connor Stone, Gregory's son. The so-called operations advisor who had shadowed meetings I used to lead, offered fresh eyes on processes I personally wrote, and smiled too wide in rooms he didn't belong in. He was supposed to be temporary, transitional. But now he had my title, and apparently my desk. That night I didn't sleep. I paced my apartment with the lights off, the city's glow seeping through the blinds. I replayed every meeting from the past 3 months, every offhand comment, every hesitation from a teammate, every unreturned email, every shift in energy I hadn't been brave enough to name. It had all been leading to this, not a restructure, not a pause, but a replacement, not just a replacement of role or title, of me. At 3:14 a.m., I grabbed my coat and keys, drove across the city in silence. When I reached the building, I parked across the street behind a row of hedges. From that angle, I could see the front entrance, the glass doors, the illuminated signage. Only, it wasn't illuminated, at least not fully. The Jane Whitmore, Chief Operating Officer plaque that had once stood beside the lobby wall right beneath the Whitmore and Sons mission statement was gone. Not dimmed, not scratched. Gone. The wall was bare, scrubbed clean. The remaining brass glinted like a wound healing too fast. And above the reception desk, the signage had been updated. Executive Operations, Connor Stone, Modern Sans Serif. Freshly mounted, slightly crooked. I watched it for a long time. Longer than I meant to. Long enough for the irony to settle in my bones. I remembered standing with Dad on that exact spot 5 years earlier during the remodel. I had picked the wall color, the brushed concrete tile, the lighting warmth. He had looked around and said, "We build to last, Janie. You and me, we'll make it permanent." I believed him. Now I realized he was talking about the company, not me. I stayed in the car until morning light broke, watched employees trickle in with coffees, badges, and chatter. Most of them didn't even glance toward the street. Why would they? To them it was just another Tuesday, but to me it was the first day I truly understood something I had refused to see. You can vanish, even if you built the place. I went home, no music, no news, just silence. A silence I'd chosen once. Now it felt like it had chosen me. My phone buzzed again around 10:17 a.m. Another anonymous message. They're saying you resigned, that you were ready to move on. Thought you should know. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because betrayal has a bitter kind of symmetry. They took my office, my title, my place. And now they were taking my story. I couldn't stop looking at that text. They're saying you resigned, that you were ready to move on. Thought you should know. Ready to move on. It sounded like something pulled from an HR press release. Something that wouldn't offend shareholders or spark too many questions from long-standing clients. It was neat, convenient, controlled. A version of the truth that was easier to swallow than what had really happened. They didn't say she was pushed out. They didn't say we betrayed her. They said she left. Like it was my idea. Like all those nights I stayed until 10 p.m. All those weekends spent editing supply chain models. All the tears I hid in office bathrooms after Dad dismissed me in front of junior staff. Like all of it had just been a phase. Something I'd outgrown. I started to feel it everywhere. The erasure, the Whitmore company website changed next. I checked it late one night. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping they'd posted some statement. Some honest version of what had happened. A note of gratitude maybe, even if it was half-hearted. Instead, I found a new section titled Our Leadership Vision. It featured 3 photos. 1. My father, Robert Whitmore, founder and CEO. 2. Kyle Whitmore, Chief Executive Strategist. 3. Connor Stone, Chief Operating Officer. Beneath each image, a quote. Connor's redesign isn't just about what you build. It's about what you preserve. That line was mine. I'd said it on a panel 2 years ago when asked why we incorporated historical preservation into modern builds. It had been quoted in Architectural Digest, even printed on my business cards. Now it was credited to him. I kept staring at the screen. My vision blurred, my chest tightened. It wasn't just that they'd replaced me. It was that they were replacing my memory, my fingerprints without hesitation, without guilt, and worst of all, without anyone noticing. A week later, I saw it in the press. The Whitmore legacy expansion had made headlines. An online article listed their evolution into elite luxury design and cited Kyle and Connor as the visionary duo behind the brand's modern pivot. It described a new multi-residential project on the Upper West Side as a dramatic departure from the company's traditional emphasis on sustainability and social inclusion. My project, my design, now their innovation. No mention of me, no byline, no footnote, not even a throwaway former operations lead. It was like I'd never been there. I forwarded the article to my personal email, unsure why. Then I stared at the subject line, Whitmore Reimagined. A wave of heat surged through my body. A strange, unfamiliar kind of rage, not the loud kind, but the buried, volcanic kind. The kind that simmers until it hardens into something far more dangerous than anger clarity. They hadn't just betrayed me for personal gain. They were rewriting history, one sentence, one quote, one photo at a time. They weren't just replacing me in function. They were replacing me in memory. And the worst part, it was working. I started to notice it in other people too. Mutual contacts stopped responding. Former colleagues removed me from group chats. Design blogs that once quoted me weekly now featured sound bites from Kyle and Connor. Even clients I had built from the ground up seemed distant, like I was a ghost knocking on glass. One of them replied to a follow-up email with, "We weren't sure if you were still in the industry." That stung more than I expected. I wanted to scream, "You wouldn't even exist in this industry if it weren't for me." But I didn't reply. I closed the email, and I let the silence speak for itself. That weekend, I walked by the company's flagship showroom. I hadn't planned to. My body just ended up there. The window display had changed. Gone were the reclaimed wood samples, the cork acoustics, the eco-led product showcases I had spent months curating. In their place, marble from Brazil, lacquered gold accents, velvet seating under spotlight. Nothing sustainable, nothing humble, just status and shine, aesthetics without soul. Inside, I could see new staff, none I recognized, laughing, offering clients champagne flutes while gesturing to mood boards I knew had been modified beyond recognition. I stayed outside. I didn't go in. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of pretending I was a stranger. Because I wasn't a stranger. I was the foundation, and they'd chosen to bury it beneath glitter. I walked back to my car in silence, and once again I heard my father's voice in my mind, clear, steady, loving. We build to last. I used to think that meant loyalty, legacy, roots that held firm through storms. Now I understood what it really meant to him. We build structures to last. People are expendable, even daughters. That night I wrote a note in my journal. The most painful betrayal isn't losing your position. It's watching the people you trusted pretend you were never necessary to begin with. Then I closed the book, and I opened a new one. I didn't leave my apartment for 3 days. The curtains stayed drawn. The dishes piled up. I couldn't bring myself to fold the laundry shirts slumped over chairs. Socks collapsed in corners like exhausted witnesses. I sat at the kitchen table most of the time, staring at the same crack in the wall hairline, barely there, just like the ones I'd missed back at the office. One morning, I turned on the TV just to drown the silence. A headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen, Whitmore and Sons to break ground on luxury condo expansion. They showed mock-ups. The mock-ups were mine. Down to the curved entryways, the garden atrium lit by hanging glass lanterns, even the motif etched into the lobby walls. I had drawn that design on a napkin 2 years ago after visiting a tiny hotel in Lisbon. It was my signature touch, my fingerprint on a building. There was no mention of me, no former VP of operations, no lead designer, not even a special thanks. I watched Robert smile for the cameras standing next to Connor Stone, talking about vision and legacy. Kyle stood behind them, nodding like a man rehearsing someone else's speech. That was the first time I said it out loud. They really erased me. I turned off the television. The apartment was too quiet again. I thought about calling someone, but who everyone I used to lean on was now part of the machinery that pushed me out. So I did what I hadn't done since college. I opened a bottle of red wine at noon. I sat on the floor back against the fridge and sipped straight from the neck. I wasn't crying, but I wasn't breathing properly either. Each inhale felt like it had to fight past something lodged in my chest. Grief maybe, or rage, or nothing at all. Eventually, I opened the old notebooks. They were in a box marked, "Don't forget why." I used to write everything down, ideas, sketches, supplier names, late-night thoughts about angles and materials. But now the pages felt alien, like they belonged to someone I used to know. I found one page that stopped me. At the top in my own handwriting, I had written, "If I have to disappear, let it be on my own terms." I closed the notebook and placed it gently on the floor. I stared at it for an hour. At one point, I even opened a browser tab and looked up flights Denver-Montreal anywhere. I considered selling everything, cutting my hair, moving to a quiet town, and starting over as a barista or a dog walker. I thought about becoming invisible. But then my phone buzzed. Just once. I ignored it for a few minutes. Then I picked it up. One voicemail. It was from Claire Rodriguez, a longtime client, the kind who sent handwritten thank you notes and paid her invoices on time. I hadn't heard from her in over a year. "Jane," her voice crackled through the speaker. "I just saw the Whitmore announcement, and I knew you were the one behind that design. Look, I have a project. It's small, it's messy, but we want you. We miss your leadership. Want in." She ended the message with a warm, cautious laugh, as if she wasn't sure if I'd welcome the sound of her voice. I didn't smile, but I didn't delete the voicemail either. I played it again, then again. By the 4th time, I'd memorized the cadence of her pause after "we want you." It was the first human voice I'd heard in days that didn't make me shrink. I set the phone down and looked around my apartment. Nothing had changed. The dishes were still in the sink, the air still stale with shame and Pinot Noir. But something inside me had tilted, like a weight had shifted just slightly to one side. That night I opened a clean page in my notebook. Not to sketch, not to plan, just to prove to myself I still knew how to begin. I wrote one sentence: "Silence doesn't mean surrender, it's where strategy begins." And I left the notebook open. They didn't invite me back. There was no apology, no reconsideration, no sudden email saying we made a mistake. I wasn't waiting for one either. Instead, I took the subway to 135th Street and walked 2 blocks north past a row of shuttered shops to meet Claire Rodriguez on a cracked sidewalk in Harlem. She stood in front of a lot surrounded by chain-link fence, her clipboard tucked under her arm like a badge of stubborn hope. "This is it," she said. "A future community arts center if we can manage it." I looked around. The lot was uneven, half concrete, half weeds, and one corner looked like it had been charred in a fire. A billboard above us advertised something sleek and lifeless, condos probably. But Claire's eyes lit up when she talked about this place, as if she could already hear the kids rehearsing on makeshift stages, see murals blooming on the brick. "It's not glamorous," she said, "but it's real. It needs heart." I walked the perimeter in silence. My boots crunched gravel and glass. In the far corner, where the ground dipped slightly, I bent down and pressed my hand against the earth. It felt solid underneath the mess. "We can work with this," I said quietly. Claire exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. She handed me the clipboard, and for the first time in months, I signed something under my own name. Not as VP, not as a daughter, not as anyone's second thought. Just Jane Whitmore. That night, I opened my laptop and sketched until sunrise. Not for a client, not for approval. Just to see if I still could. Lines curved back into each other with intention. Angles sharpened with defiance. I pulled up old templates not to copy them, but to remember how my mind once moved, fluid, unapologetic, full of faith in itself. By the end of the week, I had plans drawn, budgets estimated, zoning codes flagged. But I knew I couldn't do it alone, so I made calls not to investors or press contacts, but to people I used to respect when no one else noticed them. I found Marcus, a contractor who once redesigned an entire floor plan because the client's child had sensory sensitivities. He'd been let go from Whitmore for creative overreach. I told him I had a project that required exactly that kind of overreach. Then Elena, an intern I'd mentored 5 years ago. Back then she was bright but timid. Now she picked up the phone and said, "I've been waiting for this call." We worked out of a tiny co-working space near the park. The printer jammed every morning. We took turns bringing coffee. Elena coded the interactive renderings herself, even though her degree was in anthropology. Marcus ran site checks at night because he still had a day job fixing staircases for landlords who didn't care about craftsmanship. We weren't building a company. We were building something truer, something I didn't have to apologize for or compromise for. No one asked where I'd gone, but word got around. One morning, a supplier I hadn't spoken to in months called and said, "Whatever you're doing now, we want to be part of it." I was polite. I took the meeting. But I never let them think they were the reason this was working. Because it wasn't working because of anyone else. It was working because I had finally stopped waiting to be chosen. Claire's project moved slowly, permits delayed, weather uncooperative. But we kept showing up. There was no applause, no ribbon cuttings. But one afternoon, while installing reclaimed wood panels, a girl from the neighborhood peeked through the fence and asked, "Is this going to be a place for dancing?" "Yes," I said, brushing sawdust off my sleeves. "And for painting, and for dreaming too." The girl nodded like I'd just said something sacred. And in that moment, I believed it again, that spaces carry soul. That design is dignity. That even stripped of everything, I still knew how to make something that matters. One night, I passed by Whitmore and Sons on my way home. The showroom lights were on. They were unveiling the new condo model, the one I'd drawn years ago, now presented as Cornerstone's vision. I didn't stop. I didn't glare through the glass or stand in the shadows, hoping someone might recognize me. I just walked past, and for the first time I felt nothing. No grief, no rage, no yearning, just stillness. That week we poured the first concrete at the Harlem site. Marcus played old soul music from his Bluetooth speaker. Elena danced while measuring drywall. Claire brought cupcakes. We sat on overturned paint buckets, sweat on our brows, dust in our teeth, and joy in our bones. "I didn't need a title," I said quietly, watching them laugh. "I needed alignment." Later, after everyone left, I stayed behind. I stood in the center of the half-built hall and turned in a slow circle. The echoes bounced back with promise. I ran my fingers along the frame of the future windows. I imagined sunlight flooding in. There, in that unfinished silence, I made a vow. This time, I'm building to last. No signatures forged, no credit stolen, no silence weaponized against me. Only the kind of quiet that honors creation, the kind that allows something new to rise slowly but entirely mine. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, I climbed the unfinished stairs to the roof. I could see the city stretching out, beautiful, brutal, unapologetically alive. In the park below, kids played until the streetlights blinked on. And for the first time in a long while, I felt full. Not triumphant, not vindicated, just whole. I raised my phone and took a photo of the view, not to post, just to remember. Then I whispered to myself so soft only the wind heard it. They erased me once, but now I'm writing in ink. I showed up 15 minutes early. Claire was already there, standing in the middle of a dusty lot in Harlem boots, caked in dirt wind, lifting her scarf like a banner. She didn't wave, just nodded and pointed to a cracked concrete slab. That was supposed to be the foundation. I looked around. The lot was littered with broken rebar, half-dug trenches, and forgotten blueprints curling at the edges under scattered gravel. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A siren wailed and then faded. It's not glamorous, Claire said, her voice cutting through the cold. But it's real. It needs heart. I didn't answer right away. I bent down, ran my fingers over a jagged line in the concrete. Noticed how water pooled on one side, revealing the tilt in the base. We can work with this, I finally said. That was the first moment I felt like myself again. I didn't rent an office. Not at first. Just my laptop, a good pair of boots, and an old messenger bag, with the leather worn down where my elbow rubbed it. I worked from cafes, park benches, the back corner of a bookstore where no one asked questions. I sketched. I measured. I walked that lot over and over again, counting steps, chasing angles, imagining what children would see when they looked up at the walls we hadn't built yet. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. The press kept printing pieces on Whitmore's expansion. There were glowing articles about Kyle's vision, photo spreads of Robert shaking hands with city officials. I stopped reading after a while. When the clerk at the print shop handed me my first drafted set of community center elevations, he glanced at the name at the bottom of the page. Jane Whitmore, he said. Any relation to the Whitmore? I smiled, signed the receipt, and said nothing. I started rebuilding with people they had forgotten. Daniel Tran, a contractor I'd once brought in on a restaurant build-out, too idealistic, they said. He cared too much about using sustainable materials, about paying his crew above market rate. He picked up my call on the first ring. Been a while, he said. You okay? Not really, I replied. But I've got a project. Want in? He didn't ask questions. He just said, send me the specs. Then came Layla, a former intern. She used to show up early, stay late, ask the questions no one else dared to. I heard she graduated top of her class, only to be stuck doing entry-level drafting for a firm that used her as decoration in pitch meetings. I met her for coffee and showed her the concept. Are you doing this alone, she asked. Not anymore, I said. We worked out of Daniel's garage at first. Fold-out tables, clip lights, heaters that barely worked. Layla brought her dog, which barked every time someone said elevation. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. We poured ourselves into the design. This community center wasn't just a building, it was a message. Brick by brick, we were making something that wasn't about legacy or headlines. It was about usefulness, dignity, real spaces for real people. I made one rule. No one gets erased. Every contribution, every note, every last-minute tweak documented, credited, named. I didn't need a title. I needed alignment. Signing my first independent contract felt surreal. It wasn't a glossy press event. No cameras, no catered trays of mini sandwiches. Just me, Claire, and a notary who used the wrong stamp the first time. I signed with a pen from a gas station. When I handed the contract back, Claire said softly, "It's good to have you back." I nodded. I didn't say I never left. Because maybe I had. We stood in silence for a while. The kind that didn't feel empty, just full of everything that didn't need saying. We broke ground quietly. Daniel's crew poured the new foundation with music blasting from a dusty radio. Layla ran around checking measurements with a level and a fierce little pencil tucked behind her ear. I stood at the edge of the site, boots in the dirt, eyes squinting at the sun as it hit the newly poured concrete. I didn't take photos. I didn't post anything. But inside me, something was changing. Every wall we framed, every beam we raised, it was like I was stitching myself back together. Not the old version, not the one who needed approval or proximity to legacy. A version made of steel and silence. We hit snags, of course. Permits delayed. Budget hiccups. 1 week a burst pipe set us back days. Another someone stole tools from the site overnight. But we kept showing up. I found myself smiling at strange moments mid-argument over duct placement while sketching a last-minute ramp adjustment during late-night Taco Bell runs with Layla when all the good food trucks were closed. We were scrappy, we were small, but we were real. And in a world full of polished veneers and fake resumes, real felt radical. The news didn't notice. That was fine. Whitmore and Sons kept climbing. They announced a new civic design branch, filled it with buzzwords they once mocked me for using. I heard Kyle started giving lectures on empathy-based architecture. I didn't laugh, not even a smirk. I just turned the TV off and went back to the site. Claire brought pizza one night, greasy New York classic. We ate it on the floor of the unfinished multi-purpose room, still smelling of plaster and paint. Her daughter Anna ran through the halls barefoot, laughing. Her laughter echoed across the walls we built. Layla raised a soda. To Jane. Everyone turned to me. I didn't say anything, but my eyes shimmered. Later that night, I climbed to the roof of the community center. We hadn't installed the fencing yet, so I stayed close to the edge. Below, the neighborhood moved like breath lights, flickering cars, humming lives unfolding in tiny, unphotographed miracles. I looked at what we'd built. Not a monument, not a statement. A place that would outlive me, and maybe for the first time I didn't mind that. I whispered to no one, to everything. This time I'm building to last. I never planned to go back. The community center was days from completion. Final coats of paint drying, tiles setting, the acoustic paneling being fitted by hand, not just for design, but because Claire wanted music classes for children who'd never touched a piano. I had meetings lined up with 2 new clients, modest projects but meaningful ones. I was already halfway into the next chapter of my life. Then the envelope arrived, hand-delivered, no return address, just one sentence on the flap written in blue ink. For Jane, your presence is expected. Inside was an embossed card. The annual Whitmore and Sons Gala, the first since I was dismissed. And not just dismissed, deleted. My name wasn't on the founder's reel, not on the legacy video, not even in the corner of the back page tribute to company milestones. They had rewritten the company's story and written me out of it, and now they were inviting me to witness it. I sat with the invitation in my lap for hours. At first I thought I wouldn't go. Why step into a room filled with people who watched me be erased? Why put myself in the crosshairs of polite betrayal and well-dressed silence? But then I remembered something my mother once whispered after a board meeting went sideways. Sometimes you show up not to be seen, but so they can finally see themselves. I wore navy, understated, not black. I wasn't mourning. I didn't arrive early. I didn't arrive late, just on time. The ballroom at the Metropolitan Building looked almost identical to last year. Crystal chandeliers, gold uplighting, waiters balancing silver trays of wine and sea salt canapes. The kind of evening that cost 6 figures just to look effortless. When I entered, a few heads turned, mostly from the older partners, unsure whether they should nod, smile, or pretend not to recognize me. I made it easier for them. I didn't look away, but I didn't engage either. I didn't come here for their apologies. I found my place near the back, a small cocktail table with no name card. I wasn't on the guest list, of course, just tolerated at the edges. Then the lights dimmed and the stage lit up. Robert walked out, flanked by Kyle and Gregory Stone. Same suit style he always wore, double-breasted, tailored within an inch of comfort. His voice rang out calm and polished. We gather tonight to honor a company that believes in legacy, in bold reinvention, and in the strength of family. I didn't blink. I didn't even breathe deeply, just stillness. Then the slideshow began. Projects, renderings, concept art, team photos. The luxury condo expansion my design flashed behind him. No credit. Then the new showroom my prototype panned slowly across the screen. No mention. But the real twist, they used my tagline, the one I'd scribbled in a notebook after a grueling pitch to the Birch Group. Elevated spaces for everyday lives. No one else had ever heard those words. No one but me and one assistant. It wasn't an oversight. It was theft. Quiet, strategic, cruel theft. And they were presenting it as legacy. I should have walked out, but I didn't, because I noticed something else. Linda, my mother. sitting on the end seat of the third row, her hands clasped in her lap, eyes fixed on the screen. And when the condo design appeared, she didn't clap like the others. She looked down, just briefly, but it was enough. The moment passed quickly, but it told me everything. When the presentation ended and the polite roar of applause began, I stepped toward the exit. But I was intercepted by a voice I knew too well. Jane Kyle. He looked sharper than I remembered, leaner, hair slicked with effort, but his voice still carried the hesitation he never fully outgrew. "I didn't know you'd come," he said. "You invited me," I replied, raising the envelope. He glanced at it like it might burn his fingers. "That wasn't from me. I knew." Kyle stepped aside without another word. I kept walking. Robert was standing near the corner, his back half turned to the room. He always hated mingling. Too long said it diluted authority. A habit I used to find endearing. I stopped just short of him. "Dad," I said. He turned. There was a flicker of surprise, but it vanished before it could settle. He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve instead. "I didn't expect you," he said. "That makes two of us," I replied. I pulled the invitation from my bag and held it out. No sender, just a directive. He looked down at it but didn't take it. His eyes drifted upward to meet mine. "It was time to move on, Jane," he said evenly. "You weren't aligned anymore." I didn't flinch. Aligned with what I asked. The decision to erase my name from my own designs. The idea that loyalty should be silent even when it's being replaced. His expression didn't shift, but his breath caught barely. "You were difficult," he said. "You questioned too much." I was thorough, I corrected. I protected the company when no one else did. When Kyle missed deadlines. When Gregory's cost estimates were inflated. I stayed. Quietly, I made sure we never broke trust with our clients. "And you called that difficult," he didn't respond. I reached into my coat and pulled out a folded page, an article from Architectural Digest, highlighting Claire's community center with my name printed clearly at the bottom. I handed it to him. "Design of the Year finalist," I said. No legacy behind it. No family name pushing it forward. Just me. He took it slowly, studied the headline, then looked back at me. "You always were talented," he said. "That's not enough," I replied. "Not when your own father acts like you don't exist." The room behind us buzzed with laughter and glass. "I didn't come here for a scene," I continued. "I came because someone thought I deserved to be seen. Maybe that was you, maybe it was Mom." He didn't deny it. "I didn't expect a seat at your table," I said. "I just wanted you to know I built my own." He stared at me for a long time. Then finally, quietly, he asked, "Is it too late?" I didn't answer immediately. Not because I didn't know, but because part of me, some quiet, stubborn ember still burning, wanted to believe that question had arrived years earlier. Before the voicemail, before the boxes, before the edits. "It's not about time," I said. "It's about truth." He nodded. "I see," he said. "Do you?" I asked. Because I wasn't sure he did, I left before the speeches resumed. Walked into the chilled night without a coat, letting the cold burn against my skin like honesty. When I turned the corner, I pulled out my phone. I didn't open the camera, I opened my notes app. Typed 2 words, "next phase," not to post, just to remind myself. The next morning, I walked into the community center just before sunrise. The lights buzzed softly. My team was already there. Mia was adjusting the new stair rail with a leveler. Lionel was sketching tile placement on the whiteboard. Real work, real people. Claire greeted me with coffee and a tired smile. "You made it back from the gala alive," she teased. I smiled back just slightly. "Better than alive," I said. "Clear." She nodded. And that was all. Later that week, my mother called. She didn't say much, just, "I saw you stand there, Jane. I saw who you are." I didn't reply, just breathed quietly, because sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's grace. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It had been years since I felt that, wanting to wake up. My hand reached instinctively for the notepad I kept beside the bed, half a habit, half a lifeline. I scribbled down a thought that came to me in the quiet. What they tried to erase wasn't just my name. It was my voice. I dressed simply. No heels, no blazer. Just black jeans, a white shirt, and the steel wristwatch my mother gave me when I became COO. It had long since stopped ticking, but I kept it on. Not for time, but for memory. I had a meeting that day, not with my team, not with Claire, not with new investors, but with someone I hadn't seen in over a year, Linda, my mother. She chose a little bakery in Tribeca, one of those places with too many pastries and not enough chairs, the kind she always called cluttered charm. I spotted her before she saw me. She was sitting by the window stirring coffee she hadn't sipped. That meant she was nervous. She only stirred when she wanted to delay. I walked in quietly. She looked up. For a second her eyes hesitated, like she didn't know which version of me to expect, the daughter who used to stay late at the showroom or the woman they erased from the walls. "Hi, Mom," she nodded. "Jane, just my name, no apology, no smile, no tears." But then again, I didn't come for any of those. "I saw the community center piece in Interiors Monthly," she said. I nodded. "It's not finished yet." She looked down. "But you are." It wasn't an insult. It was something else, a realization, maybe a kind of awe, maybe regret wrapped in pride. There was a silence. This time I let it stretch. I had learned something over the past year. People fill silences when they're uncomfortable, and sometimes they tell the truth when they do. "I didn't know how far they would go," she finally said. "You mean Dad and Kyle?" she whispered. "Both of them." I wasn't surprised, I said. "Not after Gregory Stone walked in." Linda looked away. "He told them they needed someone with a bolder vision. That your presence, your leadership was making investors nervous. And you believe that?" "No," she said slowly, but I didn't stop them either. There it was, not a confession, but the closest thing I'd ever get. Why, I asked, not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to hear her say it. "Because I thought you'd be okay," she said. "You always landed on your feet. You were always resilient." My throat tightened. "Being resilient doesn't mean you deserve to be abandoned." She winced. I didn't want to hurt her, but I wasn't here to soothe her either. "There's an architecture awards panel next month," she said, changing the subject. "They're honoring community design work. Your name's on the short list." I didn't submit. "I know. Someone did." "I think Claire." The bakery door chimed again. A man entered with a toddler on his hip. The child giggled, and for a moment Linda looked over and smiled reflexively. Then she turned back to me. "He's not doing well, your father." I stayed quiet. After the press started noticing, the media turned. "People are asking questions about what happened, about you. What are they saying?" I asked. She took a breath. That Whitmore and Sons turned into something colder, glossier, but emptier. I sipped my coffee, still warm. "You know what hurts?" I said. "It's not that they removed me. It's that they acted like I never mattered, like I never existed." Linda reached across the table, not to hold my hand, but just to rest hers near mine. "You mattered," she said. "More than you know." I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I just let that sit between us. And then I stood. "I have to get to the site," I said. "We're laying the first beam today. May I come?" she asked. I paused, looked at her, and for the first time in over a year I said, "If you're ready to watch me build without looking away." She nodded. The sun was overhead by the time I arrived at the site. Claire was already there talking with two young interns about paint finishes. The building was taking shape, still bones and scaffolding, but it was standing. I walked up the metal staircase slowly. Each step felt like shedding the old dust. The noise of drills, hammers, voices, it was the sound of something beginning, not ending. And then I saw them, Robert and Kyle, standing near the delivery truck wearing expressions that didn't belong to men at ease. Kyle looked thinner, or maybe just less sure of himself. Robert's suit was perfect as always, but the shoulders sagged. The weight of something invisible but undeniable. I didn't stop walking. I approached them calmly, quietly. Jane, my father, said as though we were in the middle of a boardroom, not a construction site. "We were hoping to talk." I said nothing. Kyle cleared his throat. "We didn't expect you to be here. But now that you are," I turned slightly. "This is my site." Silence. My voice stayed even. "You erased me from your company, from your legacy, and now you're here." "Why?" Robert took a breath. "Because we were wrong." That sentence hovered in the air like a verdict. "We underestimated the cost of what we did," he added. "Not just to you, but to the soul of the company." Kyle nodded, eyes to the ground. "The designs aren't landing. Clients are pulling back." People noticed something missing. People, I echoed. Or you? Kyle flinched. Claire walked over and stood beside me. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Just her presence said enough. I had a team now. One that didn't need manipulation to stay loyal. We're not here to win you back, Robert said. We know that's past. But he looked around. At the half-built walls, the team working with purpose. We wanted to say it, in person, that we were wrong, and that you didn't deserve any of it. I looked at him. For the first time, I didn't see the man who used to lift me onto countertops to measure tile samples. I saw a man unraveling the consequences of his own ego. You didn't just push me out, I said. You tried to erase me, but it didn't work. Because I'm still here, and I'm still building. Robert nodded, jaw clenched. We know. Kyle stepped forward. Jane, I didn't know they'd cut you off like that. The voicemail? I found out after. And by then it was too late, I finished. And let me guess, Gregory Stone vanished. They both nodded. Of course. That part didn't surprise me, but what did surprise me was that I didn't feel hatred. Not anymore. I felt distance, like watching a past version of myself from across a bridge. Still visible, but untouchable. Robert straightened his shoulders. If there's anything we can ever. There is, I interrupted. They both looked at me. Tell the truth, I said. To the press, to the board, to the staff. Not because I need the credit, but because silence when weaponized becomes complicity. Robert closed his eyes briefly. All right. Kyle nodded quietly. We will. I stepped back. This community center will stand long after the condos crumble. That's the only legacy I care about now. They didn't reply. They simply turned and left. No handshakes, no hugs, no apologies wrapped in sentimentality, just silence. But this time it belonged to me. That night I stood inside the hall with my crew. The walls were bare, but the feeling wasn't. We had poured heart into this place. Every bolt, every beam, carried a decision made with integrity. Jane Claire called, pointing to the east wing. Want to sign it before drywall goes up? I nodded. Walked over with a permanent marker in hand. On the stud behind the wall, I wrote, We build to last, not just with wood, but with worth. Jane Whitmore. Then I smiled. Not because I had won, but because I had reclaimed. Reclaimed my name, reclaimed my voice. Reclaimed what silence was always meant to be, not retreat, but resilience. I never wanted to prove them wrong. I just wanted to prove to myself that walking away didn't mean giving up, it meant walking towards something that finally made sense. The grand opening of the Harlem Community Center wasn't a glamorous event. No red carpet, no flashing cameras, no headlines shouting my name. Just people, neighbors, kids laughing, grandmothers nodding quietly, builders leaning against door frames, proud of every inch they helped shape. I stood near the entrance as the sun dipped behind the skyline. For a moment, the building caught the light just right. It looked golden, not because of marble or chrome, but because of purpose. A little girl ran up to me and asked, Did you build this? I knelt down. I helped. She grinned. It's the nicest building I've ever seen, and that meant more than any plaque with my name on it ever could. Claire handed me a microphone. The crowd gathered. Not huge, but real. I didn't prepare a speech. I just spoke from the place I hadn't spoken from in a long time, my own truth. I used to believe legacy was something inherited. A name passed down, a title etched in stone. But I learned legacy is built choice by choice, brick by brick, moment by moment. Not by what you take, but by what you give. People clapped, but I wasn't finished. I was silenced, replaced, forgotten. But none of that stopped me. Because silence isn't surrender. It's where strength begins. It's where the unheard become unshakable. I paused, looked out over the crowd. Then I said, If you've ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or erased, I hope this place shows you one thing. You are not invisible, you are not done, and you are never too far gone to begin again. The applause rose gently. It wasn't wild, it was steady, like the walls around us. Later that evening, I found a quiet corner on the roof, watched the lights glow from inside the center. Warmth radiating outward, my phone buzzed. Messages poured in, some from clients, some from strangers. One read, Your story reminded me who I used to be. Thank you. Another, I needed this. I'm ready to start again. I read them all, slowly, gratefully. And then I looked into the lens of the phone and hit record. To anyone out there listening, maybe you've been written off. Maybe you've been told you're too quiet, too slow, too soft. Maybe someone tried to take what you built and call it theirs. I want you to know you still have a voice. You still have a choice. Let this be your sign, not to fight with fists, but to fight by creating, by showing up again, by doing the work no one sees until it cannot be denied. Let this be your moment to begin again, not louder but deeper, not to prove your worth but to live it every day. Because some legacies aren't passed down. They're rebuilt with bare hands, quiet courage, and the kind of silence that speaks louder than any shout ever could. I'm Jane Whitmore, and I'm still building. So can you. If this story moved, you share it with someone who needs to begin again. And if you've ever felt erased, silenced, or replaced, tell us below, what will you rebuild next?